Welcome to Eggs, the podcast, featuring the best and brightest minds in business leadership, entrepreneurship, and technology. Today, we're excited to have a very special guest, Reza Farahani. Reza is a serial entrepreneur and data science consultant with a wealth of experience in the startup world. He is the co-founder and former CEO of WFHomie, a people analytics tool that empowers companies to make data-driven decisions and create productive environments for their employees. With his expertise in the future of work sector, Reza is well positioned to speak on all aspects of the startup environment, from ideation to exit, and we're thrilled to have him here to share his insights and experiences. Please join us in welcoming to the show, Reza Farahani. Reza, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no worries. Why don't you give us a quick background of who you are, what you do, and how you got into what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of like engineering by trade. I went to data engineering, so that I started my life as a data scientist. Then I started shifting around to become a consultant, moving to a lot of financial and stuff in consulting. Then at the end in 2020, I started my own company. End of 2020, start of 2021, left my job, started my own company, raised $2 million and sold it after around 18 months. So yeah, that's a quick short background on me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, and that's the thing. So the company you started is called WFHomie. And it's funny, in that period, about the time everybody went out for COVID, I too started a little venture in that window called Teammate Apart. And the idea was, try and make things better for people working home remotely. So maybe talk a little bit about, I guess, the ideation. I mean, just given the really tight window too. I mean, you went from idea to execution to sale, relatively rapidly. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process, sort of what got you started and how that went?
Yeah, for sure. So at that time, I was working at Boston Consulting Group as a data scientist and consultant, and kind of having a great time there. Then COVID happened. You can imagine a lot of the consulting jobs going to the site, talking to customers. It's the face-to-face element is very important there. When the whole COVID happened, I was there. I was working suddenly hey, instead of flying to customer, I was just working from home, trying to keep the projects afloat, working across different time zones from Europe to West Coast. I'm based on East Coast. So literally I was not sleeping, not seeing anyone. I was the life was getting miserable. Yeah. I was dude. And I always had this calling for entrepreneurship. I had a startup when I was 18, 19. I was working with another startup a few years back. And it's hey, this is not working. Something is broken. I can feel the pain point. So why not I leave and start a company to solve the issue? And I started really deeply thinking about what exactly is missing here. And one part of his element was hey, just working remotely, have some benefits, some drawbacks. Can we start alleviating the drawbacks? So make it a positive experience for everyone. Then I start ideating, obviously the first ideas was terrible. Honest, we tried, talk to people. The first ideas was hey, let's try to send a standing desk to everyone. Yeah. And the supply chain was broken. So we couldn't even buy it to send it to people. I was it didn't work out. But we iterated until I made my first deal. It was around $30K, sold it to a company that I was working before. And it's oh, okay, there's something there, people are buying it. And that kind of triggers hey, okay, that's a good time to jump out and start the company. I can see, I talk to people are willing to put the money down. So this is the risk worth taking.
What were the solutions you were providing? So you said pain points and things that needed to be fixed. What were those things? What stood out to you that you needed to fix?
So the whole thing that we the depth of the problem was hey, if you want to build a culture, around the company, the communication is really important. And your communication is like top down, bottoms up, and lateral. Yeah. It's like we are gonna go fix all of it. And the first start with the lateral communication. And that was kind of like, like there are multiple ways to do it, but one way was just try to bring two people together, talk to each other in a medium that is not work. Yeah, so that was kind of the first solution. It's like, hey, can we start bringing people together, talk about something that is not work, and then we start bringing like events, virtual events. That was kind of that wedge in, and that kind of get our foot to a lot of the company. And after that, we start building solution to fix everything a little more in an analytical way. So now we are there. We can get data about how people feel, how people are talking to each other. Then we can build solution around it a little more scientifically. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Well, and it was such a weird time, right? Because there was such a quick jump to remote work and everything. And I remember even in starting my own little venture, I mean, our focus was really on just trying to help the people that were going to be suddenly working from home that didn't have any experience working from home. Right. So I've been a lifelong freelancer and stuff like that. So, I mean, I'm really used to working alone by myself in my own little secluded office. And I would fight with occasional bouts of feeling isolated or alone and things like that. And so I understood sort of the plight of the work from home person. And I kind of could see what was going to happen to these people that are used to being really social. And now all of a sudden they're working out of their house. Right. So we really just kind of started out with a podcast and tried to roll out some, educational resources. We tapped all the big remote work experts and had everybody come on the show. And, we really started to dig down and then cover, some of the problems that people were going to come into, and then some of the things that we're going to have to change on the enterprise level. So I think it's really cool that you were sort of, on that from the beginning. And then, we're able to use sort of science. I was using a lot of go with the gut, not so much science. And so, and actually we never really even turned into a business. It was really more of just an opportunity to share information with people. But I love that. So as time went on and we started to, I guess, people started to go back to work, there was new hybrid situations. There was also, I think, a lot of new employee empowerment that maybe didn't exist prior. Like, how does WFHomie evolve to handle that stuff up to the point where you're actually ready to make a sale?
Yeah. So again, like at first it was easy. Like everyone remote, there was like the opportunity was open wide. So we are like gliding pretty good. Yeah. So, but when I start thinking about the problem is deeper. It's not only the remote. Yeah, it's like, hey, the communication is broken. If the communication is broken, you cannot create culture. You cannot have a consistent culture across your company. Yeah. And we started like asking, like, it's like, hey, let's just start ask more questions, bring more data and see where does it go. Now, even if you're hybrid, remote, or whatever, there is a culture that came in, and that was like, now everything is on the recorded. Yeah. Like even if you are a team of 5 and one person is remote, you are on Zoom. Yeah. So, and that Zoom is being recorded. It's on the calendar. So now suddenly a big amount of data opens up. Before that, if I wanted to talk to you and we are working, it's like, hey, do you want like grab 10 minutes and you go talk to each other. So a lot of the communication was under the hood. We didn't know what's happening. But now with the whole situation opening up, like everything is being recorded, we could tap into that metadata and say like, hey, how people are talking to each other. Are people talking to each other ups, down, like across function? Like, is it like your company is fully siloed? Are your managers talk to their senior manager, to the directors? Are they do they talk to the IC? So like we could trace where how the communication is happening inside the company. And now we can give insight, whether you are remote or not remote. It's like, hey, your system like is not performing. If you want to build a high performing team, this is not how it works. Yeah. You need to have at least that amount of communication in your across your organization. Also, these are solutions how to build it. Yeah. So we start creating, it is a snippet like micro products to help with them. Like one of the biggest, actually, it sounds very like not big, but one of the products that got us around like 50,000 users, was this thing called kudos. So it's like, hey, if you do something, you could go on a Slack or Teams, say /kudos. And it's like, hey, Mike did a great job. I just want to thank him. Yeah. And that brought us so much data for us and so much usage, because people like the peer-to-peer appreciation is really important for your culture. Also, now we know how people feel about each other, and suddenly just bringing it like a better UI, UX, we get like so much usage out of it. So at the end, like we start evolving as we move forward from like, party planning committee for being remote to how collect the data and how find what are the problems and try to recommend solutions that is easy to implement and right to the point for organization. And that kind of brought the scale that work from Homie had.
It's interesting. So obviously the data is the important part. How do you go about defining the data points that you need to collect? And then does that evolve as you're going? So initially you think you need to do this, but then you realize you need to do that. Is there an example of that when you were starting?
Yeah, I think one thing is like, I just learned like being as a data scientist like for many years, you cannot ask for data, but you can bring something that people use and that gives you data. Yeah. So if your whole, you have like a startup, I don't know, it's like, hey, give us your data and we give you this. This doesn't like usually work. But if you go and propose a solution for a problem and on the side you collect data and then make your product better, that will work. So like what we did, yeah, the events it was very short time to create value. So value was right there. If I get the event, my team happy, boom. But now we are there, we can see who's attending, what's happening. The next one, like, the kudos. Time to value is very short, but now we have that product, we can collect the data and improve our product. So that's kind of, I'm not saying building something with product that's like, hey, give me your data, I give you insight is bad, but my preference is like build something that has value, people use it, you collect data and you improve your product.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a model that a lot of people don't think of, but it's really common, right? I mean, look at Twitter, look at Facebook, look at all these things. I mean, they all started with an idea, like with Facebook, the idea was that, people in college could communicate and, keep track of one another. But I'm sure they very rapidly became a data play, because all of a sudden it's all this information that you collect becomes valuable. And then, like you're saying, you can, learn how to iterate your software or learn how to, update your UI or whatever based on what people are doing or what people want and that sort of thing. And so, I mean, even though we don't think of ourselves as that, somebody said that the idea is out there anyway, that if the product is free, then you are the product. And so, and that's kind of the idea, like with your social media channels, right? I mean, it's like we volunteer all this information freely, but basically everything we say is data. So it's interesting. We just don't think about it that way. But I think you're right. The idea that if you just said, hey, give me your data up front, that it might be a little.
Yeah, I mean, like, and that's very common if you think about like a B2C world. Yeah, Twitter. But that is not that common when you come to the like kind of the B2B world, I would say. I think, but in general, we are that's kind of like the trend of products. Yeah, usually they pop up in B2C and they come to B2B. Like you talk about like Facebook, but now we have like a Meta Workplace, yeah. Or you think about like we had chats, a lot of like now we have Slacks in the workplace. So I think that trend is always there. Like the innovation, the first like line of innovation happens B2C, but you can see the breadcrumb that later comes to the like organization.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and I think you're right, because I think with most B2B operations, right? I mean, especially if you're in a company that's collecting data from, I don't know, maybe the information is private or something, you're containing, transaction data or something like that. And this is the kind of information you're collecting, you can't really sell that very well, so I guess B2B, it would make it challenging.
Yeah. Your buyer now is like your buyer. It's like you collect the data and sell it back to the same person. That's would be the difference between B2B and B2C. Instead of selling it to the marketers. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Hey, one of the things I'd like to dig into, and it's a little bit of a step back from this conversation, but as a multiple time founder and somebody who's exited a business, raising money is a big part of it. And I think for a lot of people that listen to this show, startup founders, young CEOs, people just trying to get started in business, fundraising is going to be a part of their life. Do you mind going into a little bit the process around raising money? And maybe we can just use WFHomie as an example. You mentioned that you raised a couple $1 million. Can we talk about what that raise looked like, how the money was used, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say, like, not every startup needs to raise money or like need to raise money right away. Like I had two previous startups and I'm now working on something, like neither of them was around the concept of fundraising or like later stage fundraising. WFHomie was a little different because at the time we were kind of know what we are doing, and also we knew the time to market would be really important. So we were like doing, hey, reward is going remote. There is a big opportunity here. If we cannot move fast enough, there is no play. There is like time to market is the value. So kind of like that was the what drove us to go through the path of fundraising. Yeah. And I mean, at the time, we raised around like $1.6, $1.7 million. And we wanted to go use that money just to make sure to take us to Series A. So that was kind of we raised the money. Both founders were like, hey, we can sell. So we did not need much of a sales. I was leading also the product. So we just needed like the most of money went through some marketing and also like building the product, just supporting. We were good at reaching to enough people. So at the like a starting point. So it was good that we had enough customers, and it was like most of the money was going through like, hey, the feature request comes in, we need to build it. The feature request comes in, we need to build it. So yeah, I would say like we were in a situation that demand was there and we needed money to keep up with the demand. So that was kind of the, like, I'm in general not pro fundraising all the time, but at the time, I think we really needed to do that because we really like that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can expand on that idea a little bit, just because I think you raise a really good point. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially young founders, like, just immediately think they need some venture money or whatever so they can get going. But the example that you just gave, which was that, the only reason we took money is because we need to put gas on this fire. I mean, we could have done it on our own in more time. We just didn't have time. I think is really good criteria for making a decision. So is there maybe in general terms advice that you could give about fundraising, whether or not to know you need it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I would say like kind of there's this concept you learn in consulting called zero-based budgeting. So like, hey, like if I have zero, like it starts from everything from zero. It's like, and so like, how essential is this? Spending the money and put everything in it. Yes, like I really need to build this and like be very critical about it and see if you put that zero-based budgeting and see like, hey, I want to do this one and it seems like I really need money. Or like you do your zero-based budgeting, it's like, hey, I need to put my time, my co-founder time, and like gather around 5K. Yeah. And I can take it to the next step. Do it and then see if you need to raise money then. Yeah. So go a step by step and see at each step is like, hey, do I need to raise money now or I can support myself? Like maybe you're spending your 5K and your time and your co-founder and now you're making like, I don't know, $10,000 a month. Yeah. I was like, hey, again, I don't need to raise money. I can use this money to put it in the business and grow it. But you reach to a point like, hey, like I'm doing this zero-based budgeting and I have that much demand already built up and I need to keep up with them. And then I go fundraise. Like assume like the old-fashioned business. I'm selling t-shirts. So if you are selling t-shirts and you have such, like you can do it like a drop shipping, why you go buy 10,000 units and put it in a warehouse? Yeah. So when you reach to the point like, hey, like I really need to like scale this, and then I go raise money. So I put it that way. But again, a lot of people, if you can raise money and it would be easy for you, a lot of people just go and raise money. There is no way around it. It's just, that's a very attractive proposition for a lot of people. Yeah. But if you can be a little more frugal, I would put it there.
Yeah,
I like that.
if you can get it done yourself instead of taking on the money, that's money you don't have to pay back later. So why not do it yourself if you can? So
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could maybe talk about the evolution of data science in general, how it's changed over the last few years. You've been doing it for a while. So you've seen what it's been. What has changed with the advent of AI? Has it helped in the world of data science?
Yeah. I would just start from like when I joined and become a data scientist, I just get out of like a university. I like fully blatantly, like I was lost. I'm mostly lucky in my life. I put it out there. Uh, and I went to an interview and they asked me like, can you code? It's like, yes. It's like, do you know statistics? It's like, yes. It's like, can you do algorithms? It's like, yes. And they gave me some assignment. I did it. It's like, you are a data scientist. I didn't know what is data scientist. I think like I was like in the whole like Toronto, Waterloo region in Canada, I was like the first, like, I don't know, 100 I become data scientist, like very, very new. So, and at the time you were doing everything. It kind of like, there was nothing out of the box. And if it was out of the box, it was like not working. So it changed a lot. Like from the time 2015 that I was doing it, right now, it becomes so much tool set got available for data scientists. And a lot of the process got streamlined. But at the same time, the new problems arise. So it was always the previous problem gets solved, but new problems opened up. So it never like kind of like reached to a dead end. That's why you see the like how much of the world of data got opened up. So at the first, hey, like we have this one data numerical in SQL, like 10,000 rows. Can you manage it? And it's like, hey, this is now solved problem. Now we have 2 gigabytes of it. And it's like, now that's solved. Now we have pictures. It's like, now it's solved. Now we have text. So it's always like it's like a never ending, like a road that you just like, hey, you go and new, like games, like something new get unlocked. So, and in the last 2 years, what you see is like commoditizing the old data science world. So a lot of the tool set that you needed to do, like algorithms, like knowing a lot of the stuff, now it's built into a lot of products. But with the opening of the Gen AI, Gen AI not only creates so much algorithm, it also opened up lots of data points for you. Yeah, as a data scientist, that you can get the text, get the image, and it's like, hey, can you analyze to me? And like when the LLMs analyze it, gives you a little more information about this stuff. So it's still evolving. So yeah, I think it's kind of like I always like in the last 5 years, like, oh, it's gonna be commoditized. And I see the moment I say it, there's a new things opens up. So let's see what we do the next.
Well, speaking of AI, then, I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of how the startup landscape has evolved. I mean, obviously, AI is a huge factor. It seems like a lot of times when there's these new technological trends, though, that there's a lot of, I don't know, fluff. You know, there's a lot of people just trying to start something because there's an idea out there. Maybe it's not a great idea. It's just, hey, now we have this new technology. And so I wonder if it's somebody who's really close to, you know, the startup community, who does some investing on his own, all that kind of stuff. If you could talk a little about what you're seeing in sort of the startup landscape, you know, are companies being funded? Are companies being sold? Like, you know, where are the gems, or you know, what are the best things that are happening in the startup landscape?
Yeah, I think like about when we talk about like the new movements in the market, I always think about like if this is a fluff or not. It's like, hey, I don't care how many people are using it, but the people are using it, like how much they use it. Like, do they use it like in every day? They just swear by it. Like when you think about the internet, like when it came, it was not so many people were using it, but the people who are using it were on internet all day long. Yeah. And you can like opposite of that would be VR. Like it reached to 20 million people, but you ask them, like no one was using it. Yeah. So it kind of like, hey, fluff or not. And if it comes to AI, I say not a fluff, because YC, I use it every day, or everyone who's like into it is using it on a daily basis. Like, so I think this is a breaking point in the like history. It's big, so there is a lot of investment that's coming in. You can see, and the investment is from like top down. You see like Snowflake recently bought Mosaic, yeah. So you go like very big mergers happening because they know, the infrastructure players know, like obviously the other one would be like Microsoft, like getting this good portion of OpenAI. So the big player infrastructure, they know they cannot continue without having that embedded into their infrastructure. You go to the smaller one, like the mid-level, there's like mergers there happening and a lot of fundraising happening for seed plus, Series A, for companies that are in this space. I think there is like a lot of opportunities on tap, specifically in enterprise and AI, like Gen AI in an enterprise. Like we can see like, hey, the students are using it. I'm using it every day in my business. Like it's embedded to a lot of product, but hasn't been break into the enterprise. And so there is a lot of opportunity left on the table. Yeah.
Yeah, I like seeing it being implemented into stuff like Notion and GitHub Actions and stuff like that. It's like the use cases of the AI is just, I think, endless. I think there's just so many things you can do with it that it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few years. So
Yeah, for sure. It's like you could see now, it's everything is like AI enabled these days. Yeah. And honestly, like you caught yourself using it so much. I just caught myself like it's like, oh, again, I'm using it today. I was talking to a friend of mine and he was saying he writes, he's a writer, and he used to write stories for his kid about like, to stuff like reading, and like he made up stories. And now he's doing it through Gen AI. So he asked AI to write stories for his kid. And it's like the kids told them, it's like, oh, your story is getting so much better these days.
that's funny.
Yeah, no, it is funny too how you're seeing AI just pop up and everything. And I think that's why I was curious about sort of the fluff factor, is just that you're seeing it pop up in every software, even if it's like, I don't know, kind of limp-wristed or not that great. Like it's like, no, we're adding AI because we know we need to add AI. But in some use cases, like Mike mentioned Notion, like I use AI in Notion all the time. But there's other software platforms where they've started to integrate some AI, and it's not perfect yet. But it is good, and it is getting better all the time. So I imagine there's still a lot of sky above the AI process.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's like definitely not perfect. That's kind of like one drawback that I can see. Like that's something that people like. The next big thing that we need to solve is like it hallucinates, tells you stuff that is not true. And when you go to the enterprise level, like you really need to, like I'm saying, like if I'm on a maintenance of like Boeing, yeah, I'm not gonna use Gen AI yet about asking like why this wing is like not working, or do I need to screw this screw? Yeah. So there, but I can see the word that we'll reach to that point like a step by step. I mean, maybe not for the Boeing, but if I'm like doing house planting, maybe I start using there. It's like, okay, like I had like 100 of them, 20 of them like didn't survive. So, lower risk situations, but we need to build it up and go as we move forward. Again, like finding where are the most added value, like obviously like finding low hanging fruits that this can help, but at the same time, it doesn't like create a risk, obviously,
right?
Specifically if we go to like human life.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, like, because I see it in marketing. I see a lot of people using it for social content generation and things like that now. And it is funny that you call it hallucinating, because I mean, the one thing AI does that it kind of cracks me up is that it leads with like profound confidence. No matter what it says, whether it's right or wrong or whatever, it's very confident in the way that it states it. And so, so it generates all this content. And like, if you're not paying attention, or I don't know, maybe the AI is a little smarter than you, but or something, like, be pretty easy to roll out some like crazy thing and then have it not even be true or accurate or whatever. So I can see some danger in it, but it's obviously, I mean, it's grown a lot just in the last year and a half, from ChatGPT 1 to ChatGPT 5 is like, leaps.
Yeah. Honestly, like sometimes it's just so confident. Like you can ask him like, hey, can you tell me about the trend crime in US per city? And it gives you a number. And it's like, can you source it? And it's like, it gives you a source. It's like, hey, like, and you go and check this source doesn't exist. So it can quickly, yeah. It's just like, it hallucinates in a different level. But there are always like ways to prevent that. And I think that's like whoever figured that out, that's kind of the winner, like making sure what you said, like, hey, doesn't come confidence. Tell me exactly how confident you are about what you're saying. Yeah. So then I can start getting value out of it. Like, again, there are like so many examples, both in like enterprise that could help a lot of the knowledge transfers. Yeah. So imagine like you have a worker on a floor shop, and these people like turn around a lot. Yeah. Sometimes they come, sometimes they go. And like now you have a historical generational knowledge about running a company, and you can feed it to an AI, and your new employee, new worker on the floor shop can ask question about like, hey, how can I operate this machine? Or if this machine going like a little wobbly or like whatever, I see vibration, what should I do next? And a lot of this question could be answered. So like you can have like decades of knowledge. You can pass it to Gen AI and summarize it and give it to you suddenly. Yeah. But the question comes like, is it hallucinating or not?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you can see like an obvious use case in things like help desks or knowledge bases and things like that, where, sometimes it's hard to get the answer you're looking for out of something like that, and so if you can utilize a tool like, some sort of generative AI to solve those questions or answer them in sort of, natural language, then I could see it being really powerful. But yeah, obviously in situations where it could affect life, maybe we hold off for a little while.
For sure.
So, cool.
I mean, the good thing is that they do always. So there are people who take care of that. As like, I've seen it even like if you go to banking, to healthcare, they are very, very due diligent about what they are doing. We call them old fashioned, but they're old fashioned for a reason. They're slow for a reason. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. Like my wife teaches in the junior high here. And, so when ChatGPT became, widely available, immediately kids started writing essays and everything with that. And immediately all the plagiarism checker companies came out with a, anti-AI.
How good they are. I haven't used it. Are they good?
They seem to be pretty good, but it's sort of like what we were just talking about with sort of a confidence score. So it'll give you sort of a level of confidence that I believe that this was written by, AI. I don't know entirely how accurate it is. My guess is it's doing some sort of cross-referencing between what it's finding on the internet and some, like, I don't know if ChatGPT is still doing a lot of this, but there was sort of some like tropey language that they would use. They would say the same kind of thing all the time, or they would phrase stuff in certain ways. And so I imagine there's some checking for those kind of things and cross-referencing and stuff. So it is a confidence score. It's not like yes, this is written by AI, or no, it isn't. It's definitely, I mean, the creation of ChatGPT definitely spurred on the, creation of the anti-ChatGPT and so on, to solve these kind of problems.
Totally makes sense. I think like one of the other drawbacks of ChatGPT is a little like that. It's just the best analogy I heard is like when you ask question about anything, like legal, it doesn't answer you like a lawyer. It answers you like a reporter that reports on the law, and the expertise in the, so it doesn't know much about it, but it knows enough to make a report. Yeah, you can always see like the journalist write a piece like, oh, he should know about that space so well, but you go into the depths, like to the weeds of it, it's like, oh no, he just wrote with very like a high level of confidence. So I think that's kind of like, it's very detectable. So
what's interesting is one of the last use cases that I've used ChatGPT for was I had it write a cease and desist order for someone who was using my logo on a YouTube channel that shouldn't be using my logo. They just found it on the internet, used my logo, and was using it on YouTube. So I sent them an email and said, hey, please stop using my logo. No reply, no nothing. They just ignored me. And so I went to ChatGPT and I said, hey, can you draft a cease and desist letter for someone using a logo that doesn't belong to them on a YouTube channel? And it printed out a very official sounding, lawyer sounding letter that I was able to edit very quickly, copy and paste it into this email, send it off, and within a week they had pulled it down. So it worked.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know,
Like exactly what you said. Like, and what is the risk for you? Yeah, you send it, and that's not tight. Like nothing happens. Yeah, so the risk is very low. Even if it's hallucinating a little bit, it does the job right. Yeah. So these use cases are like perfect use cases for AI, because like, you do it. Either like for that one, how much you should have paid lawyer? Like hundreds? Like
exactly.
thousands?
So I was thinking, well, if I can at least get it to sound like it was written by a lawyer, and it did. It sounded very legalese. It sounded kind of threatening, but also like professional. And I was very impressed with that use case with ChatGPT.
Well, and that, has spurred all these AI lawyer websites I've seen popping up. So, well, and I imagine in their knowledge base, they probably have a ton of like real cease and desists, right? So it's probably something that it can do relatively well. So, I just kind of look at ChatGPT as like this tool, not the solution, right? So it's a thing that we can use to try and work towards an end. So like I, use AI a lot. I mean, at this point, I'm even using Midjourney and things like that for stock photography. Oh. And so because like I'm used to using, so I run a marketing agency or a design agency, and we spend a lot of time, sourcing photos and things like that for different ads and that kind of thing. But sometimes it's really hard to find exactly what you want, right? Like I need an old person hugging their family in a hospital environment, with the lights dim or, whatever. And, I've been able to go into ChatGPT or into Midjourney and create those images and use them basically as stock photography because they pass as real nowadays. And, not all of them. And Midjourney has evolved quite a bit too. There was a time when they couldn't do fingers. So if you ever did stock photography, you'd get weird fingers. Like, so it's evolved and it's getting much better. And in the latest iteration of Midjourney, it's actually pretty darn impressive. But for me, it's like, okay, well, that photo or this thing I can generate with AI will get me 95% of the way. And then I'm going to have to go in and retouch it and color correct it or whatever. But then I'm done. Right. So to Mike's point, he was able to generate the cease and desist letter. And, just a little tweaking, change a couple words, add his name, whatever, so just the last 5% to push it over the line. So, so I think that, there's obviously some great use cases for ChatGPT and AI in general. So I think it's an exciting, space right now.
Yeah. I mean, like the other thing that I use often, I just kind of like as someone to brainstorm. So everything like I'm working on something, I drop it there. It's like, hey, can you write like 3 points about this for me? And they would write it's like, I may like not use any of them, but like it's just, start some ideas in my head. So that's one like is always like helpful, like as a kind of like, hey, what about these ideas? Have you heard of this, the rubber duck for coders?
I haven't.
So they always like, that's a joke. It's like, hey, if you're a coder, you need to have a rubber duck on your desk, and wherever you hit the problem, start explaining the problem to the rubber duck. It's like, hey, and you start like solving it. Like, oh, okay, now I can explain what's my problem. I can start solving it. And kind of like, I use it a lot as a rubber duck. It's like, hey, I have this problem. What do you think? This is like this. I was like, in the middle of it, just spit something, maybe start some ideas, but me explaining it to ChatGPT, it just also, it solves my problem already. Yeah.
How funny. Yeah. I think you just created an app idea, actually. the downloadable rubber ducky that you can download for the coding community to bounce ideas off of.
That's a good idea. That's a great idea.
Somebody write it down. Me and Mike just want a piece of it. You can do it. So,
yeah. Just the ability.
This is letters to everyone.
Yeah. No, sometimes just have the ability to actually explain your problems harder than you think, and being able to actually articulate that and get it out. Like, why is this not working? And what do I need to do to fix it? And then the analyzation between it and the rubber ducky concept of just talking it through, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, I
haven't
mean,
heard of
because like I know that I use ChatGPT kind of like that too, and I feel like I have to sort of explain things like I might to a child or to somebody who doesn't really know to get the output I want, right? So
Yeah.
I have to sort of train the algorithm to respond to me so that it gives me the kind of output I want. And in order to do that, I have to speak very plainly, or I have to try and simplify the language I'm using and that kind of thing in order to generate the proper output. So I think to your point, or, you know, or this idea of using AI for ideation is really powerful that way. And like right now, we're in the process of making a big change at our design agency in that we're moving from like sort of a traditional agency model into sort of a subscription-based model. And I've never run a company that was subscription-based. I don't really know anything about it, but I've been using ChatGPT a lot, or actually Notion's version of ChatGPT to, you know, sort of build processes around, you know, how would you start this business? How would you convert this? How do you go from a traditional model to a subscription model? How do you, you know, what's an appealing pitch, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so it's actually been really helpful. And I mentioned earlier, you know, I spent a lot of time working alone. And so having somebody to ideate with, even if it is my little robot friend, is pretty nice.
Actually, that's a really good point, because if you think about it, like we talk about fundraising, yeah, and nowadays I think even less you need fund, because you know you're working alone. Now you have your consultant that should have like paid him so much money to bounce idea, someone who writes about your website, someone who produce images, like your graphic design. Like now, like kind of an equalizer. Even if I can't, like, there is not much excuse left. It's like I cannot hire a team of 10. Hey, you have AI can do like the team of 10 for you. Yeah, I mean, not perfect. You need to still like hustle. You need to do stuff, but the cost of develop, like you talk about coding. You talk like right now. I just send the stuff in like ChatGPT. Like, can you write this snippet of code for me? And it does it. And most of the time it works. Can you write this text for me? Yeah. So I kind of like reduce the capital needed to start a business, and I think it's an amazing equalizer in the world now. So if you person didn't have access to it, a lot of the stuff, now you have access to it, like a kind of a state of art, like a consultant right beside you, a state of art coder right beside you. So that's the time, man. Just go and start your business then.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we had a guy on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and Mike can probably speak to this a little more than I can, but he was talking about sort of AI integration into GitHub and how big a game changer that's been for, you know, people doing coding, because, you know, you run into a roadblock, but now you just ask for it. And somebody, you know, some robot writes you the line of code that you didn't know, or you know, builds you the workaround you needed, or whatever it is. And I mean, so it's extremely powerful. So to your point, and it's maybe something that isn't talked about a lot, is this idea that being able to reduce capital and do more with less, actually.
Yeah, actually, it's a plug-in for Visual Studio Code where you're typing out, you know, a function, and you're trying to do this, and it'll kind of see what you're trying to do, and it'll predict what it thinks you're trying to do, and it'll show like a line of code that it thinks you're trying to accomplish, and all you have to do is hit the tab button and accept it. And so it's kind of I feel like I'm coming up in a software development age where I'm kind of cheating a little bit, because I don't have to sit back and you know, try it 100 times and go and read the docs and Google this and Google that. It just kind of like is there. And so I feel like I'm cheating, but I'm not. You know, it's using the available tools that are out there. And I think that's actually kind of critical, is like if you don't stay ahead of what's going on and use the tools that are available, you're just going to get left behind in the dust. So I'm kind of embracing it, and people can be upset at me for doing that, but I honestly don't care.
Why people be upset? Like I said, like work from home. I think like around 30% of the code was written by AI. Just like I didn't kind of like the tool that we are talking called Copilot in GitHub.
Yeah.
We had for our developers, and like, hey, like shout out to one of our devs, like Matthew, like young kid out of the school. It's like, hey man, like I'm using this and it's crazy. Like it writes half of my code. And it's like, yeah, man, just use it more then. It's like we need less developers. Good for everyone. Yeah. So I see people are using it so much, and I see as one of the things that we discussed. Yeah. Like I see the usage, and it's like this is not going anywhere. This is not a fluff. it's something that is happening, and I see how the adaptation going so fast.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I've got a hard out here in about 5 to 10 minutes. And so I wanted to hit one more topic real fast. So I wanted to go back to your work from homie story a little bit and just talk about the exit. I think most people are, either don't have an exit or are aspiring to have one day. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit just about sort of the process of being prepared to sell in the first place. What were the things that you did to actually make your company sellable? And then, maybe a little bit about the process of actually moving through an acquisition.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we sold the startup, just put it out there, was because it's a good company, but it was not a painkiller. It was a vitamin. I mean, have you heard of this one? We were good, and it's just add value, but we were not an essential tool for you. Yeah. So either we needed to move toward that direction and become a full HR, or we needed to have an exit. So when we reached to that point, hey, I think that's a good time for us to exit. You always get if you are doing something right, and we were doing it specifically with that kudos, we had a lot of users, so there was a value in the company. So we had name brand logos, we had month-over-month revenue growth, and we had number of users. So you are in a good position to sell. So you need to do one of these, yeah. Either you need to have something to sell, and that would be hey, I have access to this high value customers, I'm producing that much money, that's obviously that's it, and I'm keeping producing that much money, or I have that many users that you can make money later on. So you have one of these ones, it's become a game of hey, I have this, how much would be the value that you are offering to me? And what I would say is even if you have a strong buy, try to have competition. You have a buyer coming into you, try to reach out to more people. It's hey, we are in discussion for a sale of company. So what you would do, yeah? Because there are two reasons, obviously, supply and demand, price of the company. The second one is stuff can not go through. It could be legally, it could be because of conflict of interest, it could be that company goes down that you are selling to. So you need to have options, yeah? And that kind of give you an upper hand in the discussion, give you a safety. Let's say, hey, I'm going through this one. If not, there's the next one. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. That would be the gist of it. Try to have a portfolio of the buyers.
Yeah, that makes sense. We're kind of at that time. You want to tell people where they can reach out and get in touch with you if they have any questions, or do you have a website you want to send them to?
Yeah, find me on Twitter, Reza Farahani, LinkedIn or whatever. Just send me a DM. That's all. And thank you guys for having me. It was a great, fun discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks so much for doing this. We really appreciate you taking the time. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. See you guys next time.